Hello, I'm David Morris. The world has some intractable conflicts, like the Middle East, where there's just no end in sight, and it's depressing to think about these places. I had the enormous privilege when I was younger, when I was a young diplomat, of observing a place that appeared to us to be in intractable conflict, but which actually went through a period of game-changing events that essentially created peace and security and increasing prosperity for its people. So I want to talk today about Northern Ireland and the broader Irish question. Now, Ireland, of course, used to be part of the United Kingdom. It was part of the British Empire, and the British considered it was a key jewel in their crown. But the Irish won their independence from Britain in 1921, but they didn't win control of the top 6 counties of Ireland, known to us usually as Northern Ireland. Those 6 counties had a majority of people who preferred to stay with Britain, but it had a very sizable minority who were nationalists, who were Republicans, who wanted to be part of the Republic of Ireland. And so through the 20th century, there was this conflict in Northern Ireland where we saw terrorism on both sides brutally affecting the daily lives of people in cities of Northern Ireland, such as Belfast, but also terrorism that spread outside of Northern Ireland, sometimes down to Dublin, sometimes across to London and to other places. Many will remember that the Conservative Party conference in Brighton in 1984, when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister of Britain, was bombed by the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. And so these kinds of events shocked people, terrorised people, and for a long, long time we thought there was no solution. Now, probably Margaret Thatcher was not for turning, she used to say. She was steadfast in her position that Northern Ireland should remain part of the United Kingdom, and she would not negotiate with terrorists. That was a similar refrain we heard from Ronald Reagan, who didn't want to negotiate with Nelson Mandela, and people who were perceived at that time as terrorists, but actually in retrospect, when we look back, sometimes we see these people as freedom fighters. Well, I'm not excusing terrorism at all. I think the terrorism that occurred in Northern Ireland, and as a result of the Northern Ireland conflict, led to many innocent people losing their lives. But something changed in the late 1980s and early 1990s. There was a movement for change, and a key figure in that change in the post-Thatcher era was John Hume, who led a party in Northern Ireland, the Social Democratic and Labour Party, and he had a number of concepts that led, I think, to a key change in the way people thought. Now, he didn't come up with this on his own, but he tended to channel, he tended to represent changing mindsets that were occurring on the island of Ireland. So one phrase that John Hume came up with that I think was brilliant was parity of esteem. This concept, parity of esteem, meant that he, as a Catholic nationalist person who believed in a united Ireland, could also respect and understand the perspective of his neighbour, who might be a loyalist who believed in staying part of the United Kingdom. He could equally respect their view, and he could understand that they had a different identity, saw things differently. Parity of esteem, equality basically, respect basically. But the brilliance of his phrase was that it really worked in the mentality of the people of the island of Ireland. Not everyone initially, but it really had broad appeal, this idea that let's actually respect each other and let's start talking. And the peace talks that occurred in Northern Ireland were amazing in how they shifted the ground. Now, they weren't just peace talks amongst leaders, I have to say. I observed some peace talks amongst leaders, but I also observed other peace talks that were going on at parallel levels. So you had mothers who met across the divide. You had Republican mothers meeting loyalist mothers, and they talked about having lost their children to the terrorist attacks on either side. I was there there and had tears in my eyes. Everyone watching had tears in their eyes as they heard these mothers talk about their sorrow and hugging each other across the political divide, respecting and understanding and listening to the other side. And these mothers determined that there had to be an end put to the violence. There had to be a solution. So John Hume is one of the leaders, and only one of them, but he's one I'm selecting just to talk about today. He adopted not just this idea of parity of esteem, but he also encouraged this multiplicity of dialogues at different levels. And in particular, he was constantly flying backwards and forwards to the United States. So he brought the United States into solving the problem. And this was a very interesting innovation, because you can imagine London wasn't too keen on having Washington involved in what they considered to be their backyard, their sphere of influence. But actually, John Hume was able to bring the White House, in particular Bill Clinton, became very personally involved in encouraging the Northern Ireland peace process. And business delegations were going backwards and forwards between the Republic of Ireland and the United States. And there was a very strong connection growing at that time between the Republic of Ireland and the US. A lot of American investment coming into the Republic in technology and pharmaceuticals, in food industries, agri-food industries as well. And so there was a growing Irish economy as well. So you have three factors here. One, the parity of esteem concept. Two, the bringing the United States into the discussions, if you like, bringing them into a sphere of influence. And then you had the economic question. Now this is an interesting one, I think, because it goes to getting our own house in order. If you were a nationalist Irish person advocating that Northern Ireland should come to the Republic of Ireland, you didn't have much chance in the 1950s, because in the 1950s the United Kingdom was a much stronger economy than the Irish economy. So on economic grounds alone, the concept didn't make any sense. Now of course we know the real division was a sectarian, ideological division, but the economics just didn't make sense. But by the 1990s, Britain had joined the European Union, as had Ireland, of course. Now we know that's changed since, that Britain's left the European Union, but back in the 1990s, Britain and Ireland had joined in the 70s, and their economies were ever more integrated. And the big change that came in the 1990s was the Irish economy took off with all this American investment, with a very clever policy mix of very low taxes, a lot of industry policy that supported new industries, a lot of very clever infrastructure spending using European Union money to invest in all kinds of infrastructure in Ireland. The Irish economy boomed. In fact, it overtook the United Kingdom economy. So the economic argument that these two places, Northern Ireland and the Republic, should be ever closer integrated started to make a lot of economic sense. Still didn't mean it ideologically that you would convince someone of unification if they're ideologically opposed to it, but it just changed the dynamics. It certainly removed the arguments for terrorism, because if you're economically integrated, if all of the parties are wanting you to talk, and the parties including individual people from the mothers of Belfast to the President of the United States, if people are wanting a solution, they really banged heads together. They really put pressure on those terrorist groups. By 1994, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, declared a ceasefire. And by 1998, very short period of time really when you think of it in world history, by 1998 there was the Good Friday Agreement. The peace negotiations led to a settlement and an agreement on peace in Northern Ireland. Now that meant a couple of changes. It meant some changes to the Irish Constitution. The Irish Constitution no longer claimed Northern Ireland as part of Ireland, and both sides, the United Kingdom and Ireland, agreed that the future of Northern Ireland must be in the hands of the people of Northern Ireland. But that's a pretty strong position if all of the parties agree to that, and they all did. So actually peace was achieved, security was achieved because all of the key parties are involved, and prosperity is possible finally, because you've got this booming economy on the island of Ireland, and Northern Ireland and the Republic are ever more integrated. It's why when the United Kingdom voted to exit the European Union, the people of Northern Ireland did not want to leave the European Union, just like the people of Scotland, by the way. And so the solution to the economic future of a more economically integrated Ireland lies in the hands of the people of the island of Ireland. I think it's a fascinating case study. It's complicated and every part of the world is different, but at least for us optimists, it's a place where we can look and think they came a long way in the 1990s.